Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And Ron Paul is telling President Trump to cancel your Saudi trip and play more golf. And I side with him. Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember during the election all the times that he said that the United States will not bow down any longer to Saudi Arabia? He got in Twitter battles with the Saudi princes, and in December, actually, after he'd already been elected, he said that the policy of U.S. intervention and chaos overseas must come to an end. Instead, he's jumping into a region in the Middle East, as Ron Paul goes on to say. And, I mean, look at what he's doing with Syria. A lot of that does have to do with the Saudis, with their pipeline. And actually, this whole situation comes from President Trump embarking on his first foreign trip where he will stop in Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Vatican. And I kind of have to giggle at that. Just picturing Donald Trump going around like, here, I'll save the entire world. I'll go to Saudi Arabia and make all these great deals and to Israel and to the Vatican. It's just absurd.
Well, you know what? I would rather go with my beautiful wife playing golf than going to Saudi Arabia. I would actually honor going with my beautiful wife, wearing a nice t-shirt and being a free woman here.
And not being stoned to death in Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, was just given the position in the United Nations for their council, the head of the council on women's rights, which is just, it has to be a joke. And what I find just so insane about this is that it's just more of the policeman of the world mentality, where they are going around and trying to fix the world's problems by making it worse, and they always make it worse every single time.
Yeah, well, you had in the 20s, you had the first female, real feminist, in my point of view. They said off with the hijab. That was in the 20s. Well, now these crazy feminists are saying that the hijab is a sign of feminism. So I don't know where that got lost in translation over the last century, but not very good. Now, otherwise, when it comes to Saudi Arabia, of course, there's a massive oil pipe deal in the works that are going to go from Qatar through Saudi Arabia and into Europe. Now, the problem here is that, of course, Syria is in the middle of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was kind of going into there.
Yeah, and of course with Qatar, the oil provider there, who is providing that oil? I'm trying to look into and find that. It's very hard to figure out which company it's working with. If it's, of course, ExxonMobil, who knows if Tillerson has some inside scoops on what's going on there,
of course, a lot of that comes from assumption, but rightly so, because, I mean, look at during the election, Donald Trump went after Hillary Clinton quite often for her ties to Saudi Arabia, and rightly so. She got insane amounts of money from Saudi Arabia during her campaign, while everyone was going on about how Russia was meddling in the elections. Hillary Clinton was literally being given money by Saudi Arabia, the same country that, if you declare yourself a Christian, you can get the death penalty for that. And
Sharia law.
Absolutely. And it's insane. But also, it's important to mention that Donald Trump has approved weapon sales to Saudi Arabia that even President Obama, the drone bomber-in-chief, the guy who got off on massacring children overseas, he himself had halted this weapons deal with Saudi Arabia due to human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia. Think about that. So this is just another example of how the deep state always wins regardless of the president. He could say a lot of things, but he doesn't have the power to do it because in the end he's a talking head, and he goes out and says, well, look, I actually do I'm actually being controlled and everything. He'll get his head shot off. So he has to step back.
Well, the problem here is also, of course, the U.S. hegemon and the oil deals that they have with Saudi Arabia. That's what created the current fiat dollar, petrodollar system that we have. We got to remember that. And, of course, they have tight ties with the ESF. Working
Exchange
together,
Stabilization Fund.
Exchange Stabilization Fund, working to manipulate, of course, currency rates and so on for Saudi Arabia, and of course the oil. They got to keep the oil at a certain level that Saudi Arabia is happy with.
Yeah.
They're very controlled. Like, they have so much oil coming in from Saudi Arabia to the world. It's so cheap. It's almost like putting a straw in the ground and it pops out. So that's why, and of course the U.S. military is so dependent on that oil.
Yeah.
In order to operate, to bomb and kill and massacre people worldwide. And
it's horrible.
Yeah. The thing here is that we gotta remember is that Saudi Arabia is a horrible, horrific, totalitarian state that runs on Sharia law. They don't care about human rights, but of course they sit on the human rights. It's very Orwellian, if you ask me, that they let these people, be in power on certain.
Well, I mean, in the end, let's be honest here. I think the world government, the United Nation in name, I think that they would be a big fan of global Sharia law, considering the fact that they are all about just dismantling individual freedoms across the board, creating divide, of course, which is a big part of it. So putting them on that council probably also helps create a bit of divide. And then they would love to see people bowing down to the state for everything, which is basically already happening, but not at the same scale as it would be under Sharia law.
And of course, this new Saudi Aramco IPO that's coming up, of course, JP Morgan and other big banks in the United States wants a piece of that pie, wants to be able to help them go public so they could siphon off some more money. And now, of course, by the corrupt elitist Saudi Arabians that run the oil companies there.
Well, and by the way, we could be risking a lot just talking about this in the future, because very soon in Canada it is very likely to pass. It's already passed a motion M103 where it'll be illegal to even criticize Islam, and by that we can't be criticizing Saudi Arabia, which of course the Trudeau government in Canada has a huge weapons and arms deal with as well, which is something that I confronted the Minister of Defense Harjit Sajjan on that back in May 2016, and he had no answer for that and his support of ISIS as well, because let's face it, Saudi Arabia is one of the prime supporters of ISIS through the US, through proxy and all that, but they are one of the biggest supporters of ISIS, and they are creating that Hegelian problem, creating divide, creating danger, which gives them reason to come in with more control. And that's a big part of this issue, is just this control complex that they're building. And President Trump isn't going to be able to change that. It's absurd to think that he's going around talking to the Saudi princes, who he called dopey and everything, on Twitter during the election. Saudi princes also told Donald Trump to step out of the presidential race because he won't win and all that. It's insane to think that he's going to go around and be like, we want to make things good, and good things are good and bad things are bad, and then they're just going to go like, oh, we'll give up our whole control complex. Sorry, we apologize. We're going to all get along now. It's absurd, but they like to create that image of this possible unity between, through the United Nations, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Israel, the Vatican, and all that, but it's not real. And in fact, they're probably all working together, in my opinion, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Vatican. But that goes into a conspiracy realm that I'm not going to touch on today.
Well, let's just talk quickly about this whole Islamophobia bill, the M103 bill. It's insane to me. I'll criticize anybody anytime that looks down upon women.
Absolutely.
Done deal.
I'll criticize anything. I'll even capitalize on that a bit, John. I will criticize anything that looks down on individuals and looks at us as a collective instead.
Exactly.
Because the biggest part is what's happening to women in Saudi Arabia, terrible. And all these idiots that I know are going to comment on this video and say, there's no human rights abuses of women in Saudi Arabia, that's Islamophobic garbage. It's a fact. You go there with your girlfriend and try and walk in the streets and try and show a little bit of skin on her, just on her rib cage, or show a bit of too much leg, and see what happens. Have her hair down. In Saudi Arabia, that's viewed as a justification for rape. So yeah, you go over there and tell us how great it is for women. You go over there and see how if she got raped, she'd need like several men to take her side in court for it to be seen, or that 2 women equal 1 man, and they're not even seen as actual human beings. They've just been viewed officially as mammals. Like, this is how horrible it is. But that goes further than just that. Not just the women that are being attacked in Saudi Arabia, but the fact that any collective group of individuals can possibly be coerced upon so much. So that goes for, if it was men, it would be the same thing. You judge people by the individual, not by the collective.
By Absolutely. Who they are as a person.
Exactly. And I'm judging Saudi Arabia, the government, as a collective, because it's a collective under a voluntary collective, I may add, the government, that is, under the guise of, governing and helping solve human rights problems. They are under one ideology that is coercive and destructive and disgusting. So yes, I will call out them as a collective because they have that ideology. There's a difference between judging people by a collective they're born into and judging people as a collective to be ruled. And then on top of that, the big difference is judging people by a collective of point of view. Because there are understandably reasons to call out a collective under the point of view of that collective. When everyone says, let's stone women to death, then you judge that collective of people saying stone women to death. But don't rule over them with an iron fist. That is where collectivism becomes absolutely coercive and destructive, and I will call that out no matter what. But like as you said, John, you mentioned the oil problems and everything. That's a big part of what's going on with Syria. Of course, as many of you know from our videos, what Donald Trump was saying, and the Trump administration in general, Nikki Haley and Rex Tillerson were saying a few days before the so-called chemical attack on civilians, they were saying that Assad, we will not overthrow Assad. Everything is going to be all right. We aren't going to do what Obama was doing for years. And then Assad, according to them, just went out and said, you know what? I'm finally safe. I know what I'll do. I'll bomb my own people. Not just bomb them, I'll chemical bomb them and kill vast amounts of children. Hundreds and hundreds of children. Because you know what? That'll keep me off the hook. I'm totally not going to get overthrown like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi and etc., etc., etc. This is all a false flag. This is all part of the script that's been playing out for so long, and Trump got in and people thought, well, he's non-interventionist, great. Well, he's not in control, good people. He is the president. The president is just a talking head. He answers to the top elites. He didn't even know when he said that because he read some news reports that the USS Carl Vinson was heading to the Korean Peninsula. On the news, he didn't even know that it was in Indonesia. He's like, oh yeah, it's in the Korean Peninsula. It must be. And then it turns out it was by Indonesia. That's just a sign that he doesn't actually know what's going on. He is just finding out a lot of what we're finding out from the news. And I think people should be quite concerned.
Yeah, well, there's two more things to touch upon before we're all done here. Of course, Saudi Arabia is their economy is contracting currently because of the massive oil price, like how low the oil prices are. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they do have a stranglehold on the United States by having $117 billion in bonds that, of course, they hold hostage.
Yeah.
And can at any time, and they've been threatening with it. There was not far back during the election where they were threatening about selling off their bonds in order to crash the U.S. economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take back something I said earlier about you go with your girlfriend and everything to Saudi Arabia, because unless you're Islamic, you can't go to most parts of Saudi Arabia. Good luck going to Mecca. You're not going to be able to get in because, as you know, they've been critical of Trump for his immigration beliefs and all that. Saudi Arabia won't take in any of the refugees, by the way, and has been seen killing them and blowing them up. So there's that. And on top of that, they don't allow people that aren't Islamic in many parts of the nation, especially places like Mecca and Medina.
And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against free individuals that are Muslim that have that belief. The problem here is when they collectively want to coerce and attack other people that are not believing the same thing as they do.
Yeah, it all comes down to victimhood, coercion. And that's a big part of it, because I truly believe when it comes to liberty, the only person in this world that you truly have control over is yourself. And without that, what's the point? That is basically the premise of life itself, the ability to be able to control your own life, control your own actions, and of course not aggress against other people, because that goes against their ability to control their own actions. So I just think it just comes down to the basic message of individual liberty versus state coercion or collective coercion. So I think we can leave it at that. Yeah. I can't wait for these comments on this video. I'm always super excited whenever I talk about Saudi Arabia, because I always know it's going to be great when I open up the community side of my channel and check out what people are commenting. But I know a lot of you know exactly what's going on, and I'm glad that we have so many incredible viewers watching and understanding how this all works, and also not being getting into that kind of gut instinct of thinking, well, these guys are scary, so we should also like ban freedom of movement. We should also like we shouldn't subsidize and all that, but we shouldn't be banning people's freedom to move from one place to another. Our fear is solved with the ability to defend ourselves, with the ability to freely speak, and with our ability to get free from the state and not promote more statism to solve the problems of statism. So I thank a lot of the people that understand this watching this video.
Saudi Arabia, the problem is the church is the state.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Or the mosque is the state.
Absolutely. So we'll close it off right there. Thanks for watching, everyone. You could check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so incredibly, vastly demonetized and censored by YouTube. You could also check our address for Bitcoin in the description and the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. And check our link to the Red Pill Expo below, where you can join us in June 2017 in Bozeman, Montana, and see speakers such as G. Edward Griffin, Lord Monckton, Robert Kiyosaki, Richard Gage, Cynthia McKinney, James Corbett, Mike Adams, Ty Bollinger, John Rappaport, and so many other incredible individuals. We're trying to get a few other people involved too that'll definitely excite you. So we hope to see you there. Check that link below and buy tickets, and we'll be back with much more. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.